Resentment is probably the number one killer of masculine development. You have a lot of men today that are very resentful about a lot of things. You have the whole incel problem, can't get a woman, feel like it's women's fault. That is just textbook resentment, thinking there's nothing I can do to improve myself. I'm not the problem. It must be women that are the problem. The reality is that people on both sides, men and women, have problems. And the only thing that we as individuals have control over is the choices and the habits that we decide to instate in our lives. The reason that resentment really stunts masculine development specifically is men want to achieve things. It's natural. Men like status. Men like to win competitions, whether we're talking about the competition of who has the most money, who can lift the most weight.
And everything, really. We can make competition out of, you put two guys in a room, they'll find a way to compete about anything.
Yeah, and when the male psyche is functioning in a productive way, that gearing towards competition actually propels you forward. Welcome to the Masculine Spirit Podcast, where we pursue truth and excellence as men under the leadership of Christ. I'm Robert Krause, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Noah Bills. Today's discussion will examine how justice orients us towards God and how resentment leads to isolation, sin, and hopelessness. To get started, we have a verse from Job chapter 21. Verses 23 through 26. This is when Job is speaking to God after he's experienced all kinds of suffering at the hand of the devil. And this is Job's response to God, one of his many responses. He says, "One dies in his full vigor, being wholly at ease and secure, his pails full of milk and the marrow of his bones moist. Another dies in bitterness of soul, never having tasted prosperity. They lie down alike in the dust, and the worms cover them." And this is quite a dark and vivid verse to open up with, I know.
Sure. Definitely very visually telling. It gives you a really good image of two different people, one who has kind of, how do I describe it? You kind of see like the fruits of their actions in their lives before them. One having the pails full of milk, marrow of his bones moist. Moist bones a little bit weird, but I'll take it. And the other one with the bitterness in his soul. You're given this image of a corpse that's covered with writhing worms, and not a very good image. Very kind of blatant what this says.
Yeah, and you have one person, the first person mentioned, who is in this place of abundance and security, prosperity, and the second person is in a place of scarcity, maybe suffering, and in the end, they both turn to dust. They both are covered by worms, which is a picture for us of what life is like without God, without any hope of eternal life. There is, no matter what you do in life, no matter where you start, where you come from, and where you end up, you're going to eventually come back to the same place as everybody else. And that's sobering, because it's like, just because you think you're a good person, that doesn't guarantee you anything. Good people suffer, bad people suffer, but also good people prosper, and bad people can prosper in this life as well. And it's just a matter of trusting in God, knowing that at the end of all things, there will be justice, but we may not see that in this life.
You had said, both good and bad people prosper, but prosperity in itself is also subjective. You have to kind of understand and have like a biblical lens in which to perceive prosperity. We talk a lot about money before, and just like how, money's nice, but obviously like these are earthly goods and things to have that don't bring you anything but just more earthly satisfactions. Prosperity is not wholly just riches things. You want to make sure that you see prosperity as somebody who has a good relationship in Christ, who follows his word, who has good, fulfilling relationships with the people in their lives, who does what they can to enact good acts onto others. In my mind, that's the sign of a prosperous person, somebody who has a lot and is able to give out a lot. You'll see bad people prosper in the terms of monetary benefits or having A, B, and C, whatever things, but if they're not, tending to their relationships, both with Christ and their family and the people around them, um, brings into question what kind of prosperity do they have, and is that something you really want to obtain? In the end, we're all in the dirt. Again, we don't really see a lot of the effects of this in the end, except who's in heaven and who's not. But it's definitely something that you need to be careful of when defining prosperity. Make sure that you are right with God and right in the right place, and that is where prosperity lies.
Yeah, this verse definitely encourages us to seek the right kind of prosperity, not to seek material prosperity, because this is essentially saying that all material things, including our bodies, eventually get buried under the earth and rot. We can't put our faith in those kind of things. There are transcendent things that we can seek prosperity in. That's our relationships, character, the development of our character, the way that we treat people. Those are the most important things, and those are also the areas where we find justice, I think. And I want to talk a little bit about what justice is, the definition of justice. Do you personally have a definition of justice?
I hear yours first, and then I can give you what I think is mine.
Yeah, I don't have a super clear definition, but if I were to come up with one on the fly, I would say that justice is the enactment of a certain set of laws upon moral creatures. So like, we have justice in our criminal justice system, where it's like if you break a law of the state, then you'll be prosecuted. You have to go through all that. But I think it's important to mention in the definition that like there has to be some standard, some set of laws essentially that things are judged by, because you can't just have this sense of justice that's just like floating out in the middle of nowhere. Like, I want justice for everyone. Like, according to who? Who's whose justice are we talking about? And I think, of course, from the Christian perspective, we're talking about God's justice, which is outlined in the Bible and outlined in the way that we live and the way that we see God's creation around us.
Oh yeah, what you said about having the laws involved, I think law has a very strong foundation in justice. It's a set of standards in which these are things that we do and do not do. And when you stray from these guidelines or these laws, from this foundation, there are certain reprimands that need to be made. So to enact justice is to properly react to somebody's action or inaction based off these laws and the foundations that we have. So if you do something wrong, then some sort of wrong needs to be enacted to that person to kind of equalize it, to kind of show them, this is not how we live. This is not how things are supposed to be. It's a sense of punishment to teach us and remind us why we don't stray from those sorts of things. And then on the other hand, you could say that there is a certain sense of justice for doing good. If you do good things, therefore good is done unto you as well. And ultimately, like you were saying, God is the judge, jury, maybe sometimes executioner, kind of leave that up to him. There are senses in which you can enact personal justice in kind of smaller ways, I would argue. But ultimately, if wrongdoings have been done unto you, then you just have to put your trust and faith in God that that person will receive justice later on down the line. It's typically not immediate. Sometimes it is. It's really fun when it's immediate. You kind of see it happen. But typically, it's just more of a karmic justice down the line. And I think you can see it honestly in a lot of people, those who do not live their lives correctly, so to speak. I know that's kind of subjective, but those who take advantage of others, putting other people down, just doing what they can to bring themselves up, there is a sense of like emptiness and unfulfillment in them. And I would argue that is largely the justice being enacted. They will never be fulfilled in the same ways that you and I will be. It's not an immediate thing that's going to happen. It's not going to strike down on them like lightning, but that is the justice that's enacted. And you have to have faith that that will get to them and hopefully change them and open their eyes later on down the line.
It's almost like justice is a restoration of balance in a sense. Any action, any sin that goes against the standard that God sets for us, anything that is causing unnecessary suffering to people, that kind of sets the moral landscape of the world off balance each time that happens. And anything that we can do to move that back towards a balance, and anything that God can do to move that back towards the ultimate standard that he has for us would be an application of justice. So it's almost like maintaining a balance, and I think in the end it has to equal out. It has to be even at the end, according to what the Bible says, that we will stand account for every sin that we have committed. And, that's the same for everybody. It's a tough pill to swallow, but that's the truth.
You gotta do it regardless. Nobody's ever gonna live free of sin. We all have things to atone for, but you can take action now to help atone for it. Enact the justice on yourself.
Yeah, that's a good point, because when speaking about justice, I think it's very easy to look outwardly at everybody else and think, "Oh, I can enact justice there," or I see somebody mistreating somebody else over there. But it's harder to look at yourself and think, "Oh, how am I mistreating the people in my life? How am I allowing myself to slip in different ways that I might not be conscious of?" That ultimately, that's the one of the most important things you can do to see justice in your own life, is to keep yourself accountable. Make sure that you're not complacently sinning in ways that you might not be aware of.
No, I agree that like when we talk about justice, you hear it a lot in like media, with like superhero stuff being really abundant. The idea of justice is always I am the victim and justice needs to be enacted on my behalf, whether it's by my own means or by somebody else and their supernatural powers doing it for me. But I think it is a really good point to realize that we are also perpetrators ourselves. Obviously not always in like really big ways. Like I hope we're not going around stabbing people often and stuff like that. But there are definitely small ways that we, hurt and inflict error onto other people that we might not even realize. And not that I think there needs to be any big shame on people that do that. Those small things happen. Often it is what it is. A lot of people can just shake it off, but I think it is really good to take the time to kind of look inwardly and look at your own actions against other people and to make sure that you do right by them and you're doing right by your own and right by God as well.
Definitely, yeah. And looking outwardly, I think our main purpose when thinking about justice should be to help the people that are suffering, rather than trying to punish those who are wrongdoing. Obviously, there is a time and place for human punishment of other humans, but in general, our default mode should be like, "Oh, I see people suffering. I see hungry people in a third world country. Let's go feed them. I see a homeless person that is asking for a burger. Let me go buy a burger from McDonald's for him." Because I think you can accomplish a lot more, and also be perceived in a much better way by doing positive things, rather than trying to enact justice on your own. I think that a lot of the time in the Bible, we see that it's usually better to leave the vengeance type stuff up to God, and leave the punishment up to God, because that will ultimately be handled in the end.
Sure. No, no, I like your point of, justice. Because I mean, we were talking about how justice is kind of like inflicting balance. If something bad happens, then, or somebody commits like some sort of atrocity, something bad happened to them in response. But also, I think instead of responding to the actions as, oh, this person did a bad thing, we should punish that person. I think it's better to look at, oh, this person suffered something unjustly at the hands of somebody else. We should bring that person up instead. Because if your response to negative action is more negative action, then you're just, you're bringing more of that into this world, into your environment. It shouldn't be just stacking that on top of itself to try to manage it. It should be about trying to balance it, trying to offset the bad things by doing good things in response. And, I completely agree that it's not our place to inflict that sort of justice onto other people. It's our job to be empathetic and responsive and caring to those who have had misfortunes or bad things done to them, whether it's done by other people, whether they do it to themselves sometimes, or if you do it to somebody accidentally or unwillingly. I think it's our responsibility to try to even those things out and bring more goodness into the world rather than trying to look for a way to stab that person back.
Yeah.
There's the very old classic saying, eye for an eye and the world goes blind. I like my eyes. I have not had mine taken from me yet, but if the day comes, I'm leaving it as is. I ain't trying to take more eyes.
No. Yeah, the world going blind would be quite a tragedy. So on that point, we have Isaiah chapter 1:17 says, "Learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, plead the widow's cause." And this is really what we've been talking about. It's listing a list of different types of people that are disenfranchised, outcast, isolated people that are suffering. And as Christians and as men specifically as well, that is one of the main things that we're called to do, is to identify people that are in need and identify ways that we can personally help them, whether it's money, providing some other kind of resource, providing our time, our skills, or even just comforting somebody, just telling them like, hey, you're not alone. You're going to get through this. Like, God is with you. Do you want me to pray for you? That should be our heart when we look at the world and see all this suffering.
I think we've talked before, I think in one of our earlier episodes, about how one of the masculine traits that we try to embody is the act of provision. Try to take our knowledge and our skills to either make provision, find it, gather it, whatever it may be, to give to those around us. And I think, we already, like you said before, this quote from Isaiah is already what we kind of talked about, the idea that we're enacting justice and doing this kind of creating this equilibrium through provision. We see people that lack or that have been taken from, and we try to give back to them in order to try to make a balance. And I mean, maybe sometimes these people don't have anything taken from them, but they just don't have it in the first place. I think provision is still great. It's a great virtue to kind of have and give to other people. There's people that are always going to have without, whether it's taken from them or not. Provision is a good and godly thing to have for these people, regardless of whether or not justice needs to be enacted. It's just in the end, we want to bring more, just anything into this world, more goodness in whatever way you can.
Yeah, and I think one of the dangers that we can fall into as men is that we have this inherently aggressive nature inside of us. We have this warrior spirit, if you want to call it that. It's not a scientific term, but I think you know what I'm saying. So when you see, from a masculine perspective, when you see innocent people being harmed, you see these terrible things on the news, people bombing children, just like terrible, terrible things. It's natural, and I would say it's good to have this response of like, all right, let's get to work. Let's grab the guns and go enact some justice. Let's go to war. That is a natural desire when you see these terrible things. So you have that desire that comes up, but I think as men we have to intentionally foster this other desire, which is the provisionary desire, where it's like, okay, I see these people suffering. I see these terrible things that make me want to be aggressive and be angry, but let's flip it on its head and be like, okay, who are the hurt people that we can give assistance to? Because I think this probably comes easier to most women because they have this nurturing sense, this motherly sense kind of hardwired into them evolutionarily. But for men, it doesn't come as naturally. I think it's something that men can foster and grow in.
I definitely agree that there is like a certain degree of aggression that we have associated with masculinity. And it's something that I think really needs to be controlled. I think the people that you see out here that lash out aggressively, it's like an emotional response, like it's kind of on the fly. It's a lack of control and restriction. It's just letting yourself let loose for the sake of letting loose. And part of that aggression is what I think is what demonizes some masculine trains of thought. I know that one of the purposes of this podcast is to take the idea of masculinity and take out any kind of toxic misconceptions about it. anything I think that is like physically aggressive associated with masculinity is just a huge lack of control. And what I would argue is even less masculine. It's somebody who can't even restrain themselves. So having the idea that when these, atrocious acts are enacted on other people, our response should be to help out the people that have been wronged rather than just lash out aggressively at the wrongdoers. Then we're just creating more warfare rather than trying to, again, create this equilibrium that we've been talking about this entire time.
Yeah, and I would preface that with the fact that there are times where physical aggression and physical violence is the proper response.
For sure.
You're walking down an alley, you have your wife, your girlfriend with you. Somebody pulls up to you with a knife and there's like nowhere else you can go. Are you supposed to just sit down and let him mug you? I mean, maybe it's smart to like hand over your stuff to the guy if you're to protect the person that you're with. But when your life is actively being threatened, yeah, it's appropriate to attack that person.
For sure.
So we don't want to say that violence is never the answer, but it's
Rarely the answer.
rarely the answer. Very rarely.
No, yeah, I agree. I completely agree. I think it's just good to foster the idea that there are always other solutions 90% of the time but in the sense that if there is an active threat and there's something actively going on right in front of you that can only be stopped in a physical manner, for sure, 100% step in there and, enact God's will with a righty or a lefty. But I feel like I do see a lot of people that will try to act out in that situation when, like, if things haven't like even gone to a physical realm yet, if you just see two people arguing and it's getting heated, it's going crazy, you don't want to step in with more violent acts. If you can pacify the situation, that shows a lot of strength and stability in that person who is able to talk down the violence in the first place.
Yeah, it's the idea of not intentionally adding fuel to the fire. You want to be the person who pacifies it, like you said. There's a verse that I can't think of the address right now, but it's says, "Blessed are the peacemakers." I think, right? That sounds familiar,
That
right?
sounds about right.
All right.
I like the sound of that. Yeah, it sounds
Blessed
godly.
are the peacemakers. Yeah. So if there is a peaceful way to manage the conflict that you're seeing, that is a great thing. God will be pleased.
100%. And if you're somebody who likes the idea of being perceived as someone who has a lot of strength, I would argue that pacification is a stronger trait than going in with violence. Having the power and authority to walk into a situation and turn, two violent parties into non-violent, like having that kind of respect, I think says a lot more than just walking in guns blazing, so to speak, because then you're meeting them at their level. But if you're above that and you have people recognize that when you step into a room and you're able to control it, I think that says significantly more about you and your character than going in and trying to end the situation through means of violence and blood or whatever.
Yeah, that shows that people respect you. That shows that you're confident enough and brave enough to speak your mind, and you're able to articulate yourself effectively enough to quell whatever situation was happening. So that says a lot about a person.
It also just kind of shows that those people recognize your own strength and don't even want to challenge it. Like if you can get them to pacify without them challenging you, you're top dog, 100%. That's alpha. That's alpha energy right there. And we're all about being alpha males here at the Masculine Spirit Podcast.
Yeah, it also helps if you have really big muscles. That's why you got to go to the gym, because you got to look bulky so that you can intimidate people.
100%. 100%. That's the
I
only
mean,
reason I go.
I'm saying that as a joke, but like on a real level, it's helpful to have some kind of physically imposing presence, if you will. It's a good thing to have if you can.
Carry a big stick.
Carry a big tricep. That's what I always say.
Yeah. I agree.
All right, so we got Proverbs 21:15. When justice is done, it is a joy to the righteous, but terror to evildoers. And this just shows to me the stark difference that a perspective can make. If you're coming from the perspective of somebody that's seeking justice, then when you see the law enacted, it makes you happy. It makes you joyful. You're like, oh, these people are getting what was coming to them, hopefully that will decrease the suffering of their victims. But when you're somebody who is trying to victimize others, justice is the last thing that you want to see, because it means that you won't be able to benefit from the victimization that you're causing to others. It means that there's likely some kind of punishment coming for you, some kind of pain. I think this kind of shows the double-sided nature of justice, which is like on one side it's punishing the evildoers, and on the other side it's preventing suffering for the victims of sin.
I mean, it says, specifically, this is a terror to evildoers. I think it's fair to say that a lot of the time people kind of recognize that what they've done is wrong in itself, which is kind of interesting. A lot of the time when these people are doing these things, there is a recognition that they shouldn't be doing it in the first place. It's kind of interesting, kind of gives you a sense of humanity to people, that they realize that there are errors to our actions when we do these things. We will often act out in selfishness. That's just part of human nature. We are born into sin. But I think it's also good to humanize these people in a sense and understand that they also have a certain understanding of what's going on. They just need a flipped perspective. They need, maybe in a sense, to be provided for. Like, these people need to realize that they have other people on their side. They don't have to act like this to get what they want. They can act in other ways to achieve whatever successes or objectives that they have. But in the end, when justice is enacted, they're quivering in fear. There's understanding there that I think all of us really, have in our head. Most of us kind of know right from wrong. It is a little bit subjective to some people, but for the most part, I think we kind of get the idea.
Yeah, there's definitely universal things that the majority of people agree are right and wrong. Like, the majority of people agree that murdering somebody is wrong. The majority of people believe that taking care of your family is a moral virtue that should be embraced. But that kind of gets us into one of the main issues with justice in the world, which is that there's so many different perspectives of it. Each religious group has a different perspective of what is just. Each political group has a different perspective, even on an individual basis. Like, everyone has their own personal beliefs, and it's very hard as a Christian to communicate to people without making them mad, or without offending them, that there really is only one justice. There is only one law, one God. It's tough. Do you have any tips on how to communicate that to someone who is not Christian?
Honestly, I feel like that most Christian morals speak to people even if they aren't religious. I think a lot of the things that you see in modern society that people celebrate as right are things that are actively spoken as being right in the Bible. There's definitely kind of a misconstrued view of Christianity. I think there are a lot of people that, enact the name of it without actually enacting the practice, and that's what kind of hurts it, and that's what drives people away. So when you approach people and you do the whole Jesus loves you thing. Everybody's seen that a million times. Everyone's just kind of done with that. Like, we get it, sure, whatever. This guy loves you. Like, that doesn't mean anything to me. It means something to me, and it should mean something to you as a Christian.
Yeah, yeah, I get you.
But you really have to take an approach that isn't the same approach that, like, kind of everybody else has. Everyone's been kind of numbed out, shut off to that. Honestly, I feel like what speaks to people is just kind of being genuine and then just walking the path that God has for you, like having those Christian values, regardless of whether people know you're Christian or not. That speaks to people. Having that kindness and that faith, the compassion and empathy for people really draws them in. And then once you lay in there at some point that you're a Christian, like, it makes sense. Like, it's like, oh, no wonder this person has embodied all these traits, because you see it often in the Bible that, these traits are promoted heavily in Jesus's teachings. It all just kind of clicks. But not a lot of people will really put those two together. Not a lot of people have that kind of knowledge. Like, it's just a kind of a general knowledge that people understand. But in the end, a lot of modern morals and virtues are stemmed from Christianity, and people respond to it well. They just are kind of numb to the popularized approaches. All sinners go to hell. Jesus loves you. Why won't you accept his love?
Yeah.
I think the big thing is people just don't like having that kind of stuff shoved down their throat. But in the end, the morals speak for themselves.
Yeah, and my understanding of that, based on what the Bible says about the law being written on our hearts, is that everybody, Christian and non-Christian, have this moral code written on their hearts, if you will, or in their minds, in their consciences. I think people have this moral sense that's built in. And when we see people having these alternative moral codes that come up, it's basically their heart leading them astray, because the heart is deceitful above all things, which we have to watch out for in ourselves as well, because it's very easy for us to be super confident that something is right and something else is wrong. But we have to always have a little bit of skepticism towards those beliefs. Not saying that there aren't certain things we can be certain about, but we always want to be open and willing to listen to people with other perspectives, because through communicating with other people, we can hopefully get closer to the truth.
I mean, it helps you learn, helps you grow, helps you solidify what you already know if you're just open to other people and you allow them space to have their thoughts. And then hopefully in return, they give you space to command your own thoughts as well.
All right, well, the next verse we have today is Romans 12:19. It says, "Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God. For it is written, Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord." And we've been talking about this. This is pretty simple. Like, there are many injustices that will happen to each of us in our lives, and the temptation is to go out and try to enact your own justice, whether it's like by hurting somebody, gossiping about them, putting them in jail. Sometimes putting people in jail is the right thing to do. But the point is when in doubt, entrust it to God, and He will always repay the evildoers for what they do. Not that we should take joy in that, but we can have peace knowing that.
I agree. Yeah, in the end, we don't want to continue with the act of bringing people down. We want to focus on bringing those who have been wronged back up, and trust God with the equalization for bringing those other people down. Trust that, walking in that lifestyle has its detriments.
And spoilers, if you do choose to enact your own justice in a not recommended way, it doesn't satisfy you. It doesn't help with the pain that you're feeling. So you're gonna put a lot of energy, a lot of time into making that other person feel bad, and in the end, you'll still feel just as bad. So not great. Which gets us into the other topic of this episode, which is resentment. We talked about the definition of justice. I think that the definition of resentment is a little more interesting. Resentment to me is basically a response, an improper response to injustice happening in your life. So let's take an example from my life. I used to be very socially anxious in high school, in middle school, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you were a loser in high school.
Dude, I was such a loser. And because I was a loser, I was resentful of people, because I would see my friends around me having a much easier time in social interactions, feeling like they could be so much more comfortable than me, so much more articulate, and like, why can't I express my own feelings? And I allowed that to build resentment in my heart. I was essentially blaming other people for something that wasn't really their fault. They weren't doing anything to me. It was just, I had some stuff that I needed to work on. And in order to do that, I needed to recognize that the power to do that was within myself. And it was a choice that I needed to make. It wasn't something being done against me. But I think that this can apply even in situations where there is something that is truly, truly unjust being done against you. Let's say you're somebody growing up in a country that is at war, and you've lost friends to bombings, to whatever tragedies of war have happened. You kind of have a choice to let that build resentment in your heart, which leads to hopelessness, isolation, despair, doesn't really lead anywhere. Or you can, still acknowledge that what happened is terrible and is wrong and should be punished, but still choose to have hope despite that.
Sure. I mean, resentment is an incredibly, kind of normal and human response to things. It's really difficult to have these actions taken against you or to see things working out better for other people than it is for you and not, and not let that affect you. I mean, it's really difficult to have all these things going on and to not feel like this is unfair, unjust, I feel like things could be so much better for me and whatever other circumstances. And it really does weigh on you. And as much as we'll preach against having resentment today, I will always fall victim to it to an extent, as I think most people will. But in the end, I think it's something that's kind of well known in a sense that having these negative emotions, holding on to them, hurts a lot more than letting go of them. Letting go of them is not easy by any means. I think that is kind of a path you have to walk on your own and figure out exactly how to let go of those things. I think there is a good amount in scripture that talks about, ways to let go of these wrongdoings and just focus on your path that God has before you. But it really is individualized. Obviously, the experiences I've gone through are not the same that you've gone through, and therefore the means of letting go is not going to be the same either. But it is definitely something that needs to be said, that harboring resentment in your heart just leads to more and more negative emotion. Maybe to an extent it can quell over time, but if you're not letting go, there's always something that's going to be there. And it'll give you doubts, it'll give you anxiety and all these other bad pent up mental afflictions. It shouldn't be ignored. It should be known and addressed and then taking the time to heal as much as you can.
If it's ignored, it'll only grow. Resentment is the type of thing that if you leave it alone, it'll fester, it'll multiply, it will continue to grow until you directly confront it. It's like a little weed, like a little yeah, virus exactly. It spreads very quickly.
For sure. I agree. I mean, like you find new ways to apply that resentment. It might start off because of one thing. It might start off because your coworker got a promotion before you did, but then you start finding other ways to apply that resentment in other aspects of your life. I do agree that it is something that has a lot of potential to grow or maybe even move around. That's why it's really important to be aware of it.
And, we talk a lot about masculine development on this podcast. I would say that resentment is probably the number one killer of masculine development, because I think you have a lot of men today that are very resentful about a lot of things. You have the whole incel problem, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Involuntary celibates, can't get a woman, feel like it's women's fault. That is just like textbook resentment, thinking that there's nothing I can do to improve myself. I'm not the problem. It must be women that are the problem. And so I'm just going to be sad and not have a girlfriend and not develop myself and all this crap. When the reality is that people on both sides, men and women, have problems. They both do things that are not ideal. And the only thing that we as individuals have control over is the choices and the habits that we decide to instate in our lives. So yeah, there's tons of resentment in the world today. I think the reason that resentment really stunts masculine development specifically is men want to achieve things. It's natural. Men like status. Men like to win competitions, whether we're talking about the competition of who has the most money, a sports competition, a who can lift the most weight,
Anything
who
and everything, really. We could make competition out of, you put two guys in a room, they'll find a way to compete about anything.
yeah. And when the male psyche is functioning in a productive way, that kind of gearing towards competition actually propels you forward. And it's not a negative thing. It's a good thing because you're not taking it too seriously. You're not like, oh man, if I don't do better than this guy on this thing, then I'm worthless. I'm nothing. But you can flip that to feel like you're competing with all these people. But if you fail, then it negatively impacts your self-worth. And that's not true. It doesn't impact your self-worth. You're still worth the same amount. You have the same amount of dignity.
Reflects your perception of self-worth for sure, and that has value on its own, but like you said, it doesn't change anything about who you are in the end. But it was an interesting point that you made with the there are some people who, when they harbor resentment, there's this idea that they are owed something. And if we're talking about, the comparison and contrast of justice versus resentment, when an injustice is enacted on us and we adopt the victimhood mindset, that's when we feel like we are owed something. But I think realistically, a lot of the time, we aren't really owed anything. it's ultimately, in the end, it's your own responses and how you move forward that gets you somewhere rather than having something given to you. It is really nice and easy to think that just because something bad happened to you, that you just get something out of it automatically. And that's, a sense of justice that we have in our head. But that idea that we should just be given things is kind of part of the idea of resentment. It's that something bad happened, but I didn't get any reparations for it. Therefore, I'm going to harbor this ill will in my heart because of it, rather than finding ways to move on and heal from it using my own means.
The sad thing is that people get addicted to that feeling of being owed something, being wronged by the world. And it becomes addicting because there are communities that are built around these identities of victimhood. Like, going back to my example of social anxiety, I could have claimed for my entire life, oh, I'm just somebody that has social anxiety. I can't go out to bars. If I don't know the majority of the people somewhere, I can't be in that situation. I could have come up with all these excuses to not push myself out of my comfort zone. But instead, with the provision of God, I was able to overcome that and even do some public speaking, that kind of thing. So when you choose to believe that something can't change, it's not going to change, because what you choose to believe is very powerful.
I mean, in a sense, we do have a lot of limitations. We are just human, we are earthly. But if there is something really profound to you that needs to change, God can do anything. You know, just in the end, it just comes down to bringing the situation, laying it at God's feet, and letting Him deal with it. We can't do everything, but God can.
Amen. On the same kind of note, we have 1 Peter 2:23. This is about Jesus suffering on the cross. When he was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. For me, the main thing I take from this is he entrusted himself to God, who judges justly. This is the example that we're meant to follow as well, because when we trust God, he's all powerful. So we can, any of our concerns, no matter how intense, no matter how scary they seem, he can take those and shoulder those and carry them for us. We don't have to carry that burden.
I mean, it just kind of comes back to it says when he was reviled, he did not revile in return. He did not harbor any resentment. I think it just kind of comes back to the idea that we place a lot of trust in God to have control of the situation and get us in a better place. But we also, in return, need to harbor goodwill in our own hearts and kind of keep our eyes forward, keep our eyes on God, keep moving in the path that He has for us, and we'll get what we need out of it. He'll provide.
And it's easier said than done. I think that trusting in God is one
It's
of
hard.
the central challenges of being a Christian. It is challenging because even after we become Christians, after we accept Jesus, we continue to have challenges and suffering in our lives. That makes it difficult sometimes. Makes us want to doubt what we believe. But in my experience, even looking back through all of the most difficult times in my life, I can see that God was there and he was providing for me. He was giving me people in my life that would direct me towards wisdom and towards better choices. Yeah. So I think looking back on your past struggles can really help you to move through the stuff that you're currently going through.
I mean, if you can look back and see what you've already gotten through and what you've already accomplished, the silver linings that you had there help you see the ones that you have now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So the last thing I wanted to discuss today was the story of Cain and Abel, which is one of my favorite stories in the Bible. It's a bit depressing as far as stories go, but when we're thinking about justice and resentment, I think that this story is very pertinent. So I'll give a brief summary of the story for anybody who doesn't know it. Basically, you have Cain and Abel. They are the sons of Adam and Eve in Genesis, and both of them are presenting offerings to God. Cain basically, chooses the worst, I believe it's sheep in the story. Let's just say it's sheep for the sake of this summary. He basically chooses his worst sheep to sacrifice to God, whereas Abel chooses the best one because he wants to give his best sacrifice to God. Of course, God is not happy with Cain's sacrifice, but he does approve Abel's sacrifice. And because of this, Cain is resentful towards his brother Abel. God even warns him, he's like, Cain, sin is knocking at your door right now. Something bad is bound to happen. Be careful. But Cain does not listen, and Cain goes out into the field with his brother and murders him. He murders him, and then God curses him, and he walks the earth as a cursed man, yada, yada, yada. And then the whole Bible happens. So, why are we talking about this in the justice and resentment episode? I think that it's very interesting that Cain was resentful of Abel, but Abel represented the thing that Cain wanted to be. Cain wanted to be in Abel's situation. Cain wanted to be the one who was offering the good sacrifice that was approved by God. But instead of looking to Abel for wisdom and for inspiration, he decides to murder him. So that seems counterintuitive at first. It's like, if this is your ideal, this is what you want to be, why are you going to murder this person that in reality you look up to? And I think it's the shame, it's the resentment, it is the guilt that drove him to do that, which is pretty intense warning for us.
Sure. I mean, this story does just kind of ultimately encapsulates a lot of what we talked about, gives a parable to the idea of resentment, letting it fester in you, letting it, control you in a sense, and then you do things that you ultimately regret. And then justice is enacted not by man's means, but by God's means.
Yeah, and that's not a place that you want to be in. You don't want to have God's justice enacted upon you. It's a bit of a scary place to be. But I think this story symbolizes a temptation that we can easily fall into, where we have this resentment and negative feeling towards the people that we actually want to emulate. It's basically jealousy taken to an extreme, where, say, you see somebody in your career field that keeps getting promotions, they're making more money than you. They're in the exact position that you want to be in. You have two ways you can approach that. You can talk to them and be like, "Hey man, how'd you do that? What did you learn along the way that I can learn from you?" And try to, turn it into a positive thing. Or you can fester in your parents' basement and be like, "Man, this guy just took everything that I wanted. He's getting all the money. He's getting all the promotions, and I'm nothing. Man, I'll never be like him." And, if you take it to the extreme, you could try to sabotage him. Maybe you like start some rumor about him and try to get him fired from his job. But it's like these kinds of temptations come up a lot in life as we have goals and there are other people working towards those same goals alongside us. Do you have any experience with that?
I feel like I'm more filled with smaller resentments than larger ones that have made impressions on me. I've gotten to the point where I can resentments there for sure. Probably always has been, probably always will to an extent. For me, resentments don't. I haven't really festered anything against anybody more than myself. I've always been the type of person that very cognizant of my own ability to change things. And if I grow resentful, if I grow truly resentful of anything, it's of myself for not doing more or not doing what I should be doing, which I think is just it's kind of a different thing. I know it's not exactly what you were asking about. I feel like at any time I find myself resentful of somebody else, puts me in a place where I become resentful of myself for not doing more to be in that person's position.
Yeah, I
There's
see what you're saying.
not a lot of like specific people that I've really hunkered down and like started maliciously planning against. It's more of like, oh, why am I not in a position like that? What are you doing? What are you doing to yourself, dude? Like, what's going on? Why are we like this? Stupid, dumb
Which
little boy.
Yeah, you don't want to be calling yourself stupid and all that, but it's better to have that resentment cause you to look inwardly than to look outwardly at the other person. Because like we've said many times, what you can control is yourself, your inward actions, the way that you relate to yourself. In this story of Cain and Abel, we also see God's justice because we see that there is a stark difference between good sacrifices, quality sacrifices, and sacrifices that are lacking, sacrifices where you're just like, oh, this is something that I don't even want. So yeah, sure, I'll give it to God. I don't need it.
Yeah, it's not even a sacrifice at that point. And I think that's kind of the point of it. 'Cause it
Yeah.
wasn't a true sacrifice. It wasn't something that was beneficial to you that you gave up willingly.
Yeah, which is another good lesson we can learn from the story is that if you want anything of value, you need to give up something of value. You can't be somebody who comes into work and half-asses it and expect to get promotions, to move up. You have to give your own value to receive value in return.
For sure. I mean, sometimes in some cases, people will get things without making sacrifices. That's kind of more of a luck or a situational thing. But in order to truly deserve something and to wholeheartedly make the best of it, I think it comes from a place where you made sacrifices to get to that point.
It's very true. And when you make those sacrifices and you see the fruits of those things, it feeds into a loop when you're able to just like continue doing that. You're able to do that in every area of your life.
Yeah, that satisfaction goes hard.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Please send us your thoughts, suggestions, and criticisms at masculinespiritpodcast@gmail.com and follow us on Instagram at masculinespiritpodcast. We look forward to continuing this journey together. Y'all have a blessed day.
Finding strength in submission, that's the mission. Breaking chains of tradition, new position. Walking in his vision, divine commission. This is masculine spirit, listen. Started as a boy with a heart full of questions, seeking validation through worldly possessions, learning wrong lessons about masculine expression. Depression hit heavy with painful suggestions that I wasn't worthy, wasn't making impressions, till I found his message and started progressing. Through every blessing and every testing, now I'm addressing the lies I was festering. Stand up, warrior, it's time to rise. Let his light shine through your eyes. Every battle makes you rise. This is where your spirit flies. Yeah, this is where your spirit flies. See, the thing about manhood, it isn't in muscles, though I built them daily through physical struggles, deeper than hustles and temporary puzzles. Spirit was muzzled till Christ came to shuffle my priorities, showing me purpose is foundational, rational, factual, but still inspirational, national, global, yet still congregational, building generational wisdom, that's operation. Finding strength in submission, that's the mission. Breaking chains of tradition, new position. Walking in this vision, divine commission. This is masculine spirit, listen. Biblical principles, giving me clarity. Carrying wisdom through all this disparity. Apparently strength isn't measured in scarcity. Rapid with charity, prayer, sincerity. Finding the warrior spirit inside of me. Guided by a light that was hiding inside of me. Pride had to die for this rod to be righteous. See, Christ had to rise for this life to be bright in me. Sometimes we fall. Sometimes we crawl. But through it all, we hear his call. Building walls, standing tall, breaking falls, for our brothers. Yeah. Brothers, we stronger when walking together. Whether the weather is stormy or better, we measure our treasure in spiritual leather and never say never to heavenly preference. Learning to lead when we're serving the least of us. Freeing the beast while releasing the priest in us. Seeking increase while the feeder was keeping us. Chained to beliefs that are deeply deceiving us. Stand up, warrior, it's time to shine. Let your light lead down the line. Every brother by design. This is where our spirits climb. This is where our spirits stand as a beacon for the brothers still seeking. Show them strength isn't weakness when you're down on your knees. Every trial that tested me, every mile that pressed in me, built the man God blessed in me. Now I'm walking in destiny.